Hello. How are you going, everybody? And we're ready to go with this one. Now, when I first got in touch with Sarah to speak at one of our conferences, and she said she'd heard of me, I was so honoured. The Sara Pugh had actually heard of me, and that was blew me away. But I tell you what, we've become friends as well, and she's amazing. I love her so much. And every talk that I've heard her do, there's always some really surprising angles on things. So I'm sure, prepare for some today. Sara Pugh.
Thank you very much, Phil. Phil, before you run off, the clicker isn't working.
Oh. It was a little while ago, wasn't it?
It's no big deal. I can use good old-fashioned space bar.
Is it when you press play or something, you start the thing? And then you start slideshows.
Oh, so we have listen. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm Sarah, and in this talk, I want to at some point get to explain to you why I think eating non-seasonal and local produce is so bad and inflammatory, and why I actually think probably 95% of the fruit and vegetables we actually buy in the shops are not seasonal and local. But I can't just say that. I have to walk you through a whole big story about information, light, mitochondria and things like that. So there'll be plenty of things about food in here, but like Phil says, I'm looking at things from a different angle. I'm also going to talk about water, because people are very focused on getting the most perfect food, but they also neglect drinking water, and I think that's something really important. But also, water's a whole massive world of its own. And then bioelectricity, because we are inherently bioelectric beings, and also the mitochondria, which we're going to talk about, the electron transport chain, that's just an electric current going down the mitochondria. And people, we are much more than just a lump of flesh, although being a lump of meat is important for what we choose to eat. And then I had some requests, because I took the deuterium out of the talk just to make it not too long, and then also I put it back in now because it does tie in. And also somebody asked, can you put something esoteric in? So I said yes, but it has to go at the end, after the science. So first of all, my background, I did a BSc in genetics and biochemistry, then I did something called an MRes in bioinformatics, and that's data mining. And just for an example to make it relatable to you, the Human Genome Project and the information that came out of that would be something bioinformatics could be looked at. And that was a huge disappointment, as we know. Venture capitalists lost billions because they were expecting humans to have 200 or 100 genes, and we only had 20,000 or 25,000, and things like cauliflowers had more than we did. So it did turn out to be, okay, well, genetics, maybe that's not the be-all and end-all. And I just finished my degree by then, so I sort of was starting to think, hang on a minute, I don't completely believe science. Then I did a PhD in protein folding, and this was on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and prions. That's this topic. Well, what I actually did was I did something called fluorescence resonance energy transfer. So it's just shining light at proteins and looking at how they fold. The prion business, I don't really hear very much about prions anymore, though I did it at a water conference in relation to polyethylene glycol in vaccines, possibly leading to prion disease, but I haven't heard anything about prions since my PhD, and then before that it was all the rage, the sort of scaremongering about beef and CJD. So then after my PhD I did a postdoc, another one, I did some post-PhD work on prions and things like that. I worked on statins, cholesterol and heart cells, and that was the real kicker for me to want to leave science, because it was so obvious. Here's some money, said the British Heart Foundation, here's £250,000. Can you do some experiments to produce these graphs, please, to say that how good statins are? So unfortunately, I did contribute to the lies, but at least I had the decency to leave. And I did try and expose it, because I was also a fire warden, so I was allowed to go in and out of people's offices when there were fires, and we had loads of those in the lab, so I did snoop and poke a little bit. But the thing about it was, by then I really thought, I'm not happy, I'm doing something really wrong here, I'm going to leave science. So in my 20s, just looping back to what we're going to be talking about, light, water, magnetism, and mitochondria, I thought light is just so I can see, and then proteins and DNA and bacteria all emit light, so biochemists can study them. That's what I thought. And then I thought water's for drinking and for me to do experiments in. Then magnetism, I just thought it was things that you just stick on the fridge. That's fine. And you can interpret I love meat eating how you want. And then I also thought mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and they make ATP, and that's it. But there's no more to mitochondria. They're just this thing that makes adenosine triphosphate. And you'll see later how wrong I was. But one thing I did get right in, I'm very proud of in 1999, I did the Atkins diet. I actually did it out of a book, and I would have been 20 then. And nowadays, when I see sort of people can't seem to do keto or carnivore, and especially carnivore, which is so easy, I just thought a lot of us as students just bought a book and we did it. And for any of you has anybody here done the Atkins diet? Okay, so you know the first bit is the best bit, like the first 2 weeks when you just eat no carbs, and then later on, after the induction phase, you start to add carbs and things back, and then all of the results that you got seem to go away. And as I was saying before, it was really nice to eat meat again, because I was frightened of beef because of the BSE business, and I think that put a lot of people off beef for a long time. And there's lots I could say about these viruses just happening to appear at certain times in history, and I feel really sad for the beef industry, and then they had the foot and mouth saga later. So with Dr. Atkins and the Atkins diet, he was actually an extremely clever man, and he was very much into that you're not a bad person if you have food issues. It's a chemical disorder, and if you change your way of eating, you can overcome sort of cravings for sugar. And this is just me drawing a little picture saying what a professor at the university would say about Dr. Atkins and his silly fads. And Dr. Atkins didn't die of a heart attack, he actually slipped and fell. Because people like to say, oh no, he ate all that bacon and beef and everything and he died. No, it's not true. So again, another question for you all. Who here pulled the plaster off all in one go and went keto and carnivore, and then the other question is going to be who pulled it off slowly. So first of all, who went all in like I did with, okay. And then who pulled the plaster off slowly? Okay. And is there anybody who's deciding whether they're going to pull the plaster off slowly or quickly? Okay, good. Right, so then I had another life, and this is where I taught Pilates, I did movement, I did hypnosis, I did neurology, which is vision, vestibular system, sensory. And because all the way through my life I've been looking for solutions to problems, and I'll think, oh, it has to be the food, or it has to be the movement, it must be my core, it must be my inner ear, it must be all this, that and the other. So I'm always kind of looking for new things. And then I got clients and the same thing happened. And as you'll find, I often in my life go back to things over and over and over, maybe like you with new insights. So basically after working in a right brain world with a lot of people that did Reiki and a lot of vegans, which I won't go into, with hypnosis and with movement, I learned that water was much more than just H2O, and consciousness and minds are not inside skulls. And also learned how to talk to lay people, because I'm sure lots of people have here as a lay person has tried to read a scientific journal, or had to interact with a scientist, or had to watch a scientist do a presentation where they're in full science swing, and it's sort of not geared for lay people. Then in my third life, which started in 2016, that's when I did some training in ketogenic diets, because I was already doing workshops on keto and fasting. I just have gone back to the biochemistry. I did them on detox and medicinal plants, which I thought at that time was something good. And then I trained with Beth Zupek-Kania in medical ketogenic diets and Georgia Eade, who lots of people probably know. And then I got into quantum biology in 2016 because I saw Dave Asprey with some blue blockers, and I bought a pair, and I've still got them because I brought when we talk about blocking light. So I've still got that pair of glasses, the coloured lenses that Dave Asprey was wearing. Obviously not, I don't have his pair. So now we've had a bit of the background, we will dive into some more of the talk. So when we talk about information and the kind of information I want to talk about, it's to do with active information, because we know that all nerves, biochemicals, food, light, stimuli, they all carry and convey information. And this isn't facts, it's sort of the kind of active information that when we are exposed to a food or light or something, it triggers a response in the body. And a lot of this transfer of information is not necessarily biochemical. It can be through fields or through light, which is photons. So everything in the body isn't an ongoing chemical reaction. And a famous physicist, David Bohm, he's sort of the person who brought this idea of fields informing or giving information. So biology isn't just linear biochemical reactions, there's a lot more to what goes on. But it doesn't matter, because you'll get the idea of what I mean as we go through. And with this information, the reason it's important is that electrons carry energy and information, and this is sort of on a quantum level. Like I said, it's not facts. And then all chemical reactions in the body involve electrons moving around, and they're conveying information here, there, and everywhere. Light from our environment provides energy and information, because as humans we can act like a solar panel and get energy from the sun, which will be really obvious how when we get into that later. Then water stores energy and information, way more than people can possibly imagine. And I can't do water justice in this talk, so I can't really do a whole talk on water and people like Emoto and Luc Montagnier, who've transferred sort of resonances of DNA all the way across the world in water, and then people have then used that DNA and expressed it. So that's a whole other world. And then, like I was saying before, there are electromagnetic fields in mitochondria around us. And a field informs, and it especially informs anything that's got water in it, which is sort of us. So just as a quick example of some fields that we are encountering, like the Schumann resonance, that's really important. That's the heartbeat of the Earth, so that's about 7.82 hertz. And there are sort of other frequencies, but the heartbeat of the Earth is something that's very important for stimulating alpha waves to make us relax, and that's why people are enjoying themselves outside so much in the Schumann resonance, because they're connected to nature. We've got the Earth's magnetic field, which we're aware of, and the Earth's magnetic field isn't what gravity is. And then we have sort of lots of electric currents that go around the Earth. So these are all just natural fields that we live in, and our bodies are designed to be okay with these and get benefit from them. Then we have biofields, so it's pretty well known now that the heart produces an enormous biofield that spreads sort of 20 feet or more out of the body, and then doctors and people have been measuring biofields from brains for a long time. And then we've got sort of more full body images. So again, as humans, we make EMFs or electromagnetic radiation, and as we know, some people have got a lovely energy and other people you just want to get out of their biofield as quick as possible. And we've all felt that. And also DNA has its own biofield as well. So after doing a degree in genetics, I could spend 2 hours telling you what DNA really does. So anyway, we've got these biofields that we live in and we make. Then we've got these man-made biofields as well. And when we talk about how the mitochondria works, if there are any electrical engineers here, if you've got something that an electric current runs through and you put other electric fields near it, you know that it'll get distorted. So mitochondria don't really like these artificial fields that we put them in. All the more reason to feed them the right food or things. So basically, where and what you eat and who you eat it with matters as well. So it's not a reason to think, oh yeah, it's fine to eat pastry because I'm outside and with my friends. I completely disagree with that. I just think that the environment where you eat matters, and I'm always about trying to, no matter what I do, I want to do it better. So, being whatever version of carnivore I do, if I eat it outside, it's going to be even better. So when we talk about information now, so we're going to come back to this again. So with our human cells, one cell does about 1 million biochemical reactions per second, and we've got about 37.2 trillion cells. So I did actually put the final number up, and it's something like 10 to the 22 reactions per second. So this is how much information is flying around, not just in one cell, but in your whole body. So you can imagine that if we had a load of sort of bad signals, which can be lots of different things, this is going to get in the way of this sort of intricate communication that's going on inside the cells. And there's all different ways of describing this bad information. So you can call it creating chaos in the cell. Stress is another way. This can cause inefficiency, and it also can cause inflammation. So if we've got a load of noise in the background of our sort of intricate quantum reactions that want to happen in cells or biochemical reaction, it's going to be a problem. So just sort of for some people, like I've just made some pictures as well. So we ideally want things to be sort of quiet in the body so that the signals that are important, the important information can get through, and we're not loading the cells in the body with unimportant information. So it's just, if you were like a cell or something, it's like, you know, when you're trying to listen to a podcast and someone's got really bad audio, you can't hear the information properly because the noise is there and it can be very annoying, and that's how your cells feel. And your mitochondria feel if you burden them with sort of lots of noise. So there's lots of different sources of noise or incoherence, and I'm sure other people can think of things I haven't put on the list. So what we're going to talk about today is light with bad or incorrect information, and also food with horrible information. Because of course we can talk about non-native EMFs or radiation, but one important thing I always tell people is, because people can go crazy about parasites and non-native EMFs and blue light. Some of the stuff you just can't control, so you can't do anything about it, but you can always control what you put in your mouth. So that I always hold that very, especially with people I work with that go crazy about these incoherence that they're being subjected to. The other thing which could cause incoherence in the body is incorrect or unnecessary supplements, because you're putting something with information that got programmed in a factory. The vitamins weren't made naturally, they were made chemically, especially B vitamins, and vitamin D is a particular one that makes me disturbed, and melatonin's another. It's made in a factory, the information is not natural. Then we've got heavy metals and things which shouldn't be in the body, horrible noises, phonons, and then trapped memories and traumas. And there's a whole load of other things that you could imagine that's incoherent information to your body that just makes it harder to do its job. And then we're going to talk about light now, and I'm not going to make it too physicsy, but I'm just going to keep putting this picture in of a light wave. Because with the light wave, people think it's just do-do-do-do-do, like they forget that there's the magnetic part that runs at 90 degrees. So already in light, we don't just have a stream of wave packets called photons that travel at the speed of light. We've also got magnetic information, so there's lots of information in that light wave. So it's going to have energy and it's going to have information. So then this is something called a transverse wave, because it does this. And right at the end, we're going to touch on something called a scalar wave, because people think it is a particular thing that it might not be. But we may not get to the end, which is fine. So just a question to you all, can we see all light? No. Okay, so anybody want to say any kind of invisible light that might be helpful? Yeah, that's it. That's invisible light, yes. Whether it's helpful. It's helpful, yes, medically. Okay, so we'll jump to the next slide. So you can. There's no such thing as a wrong answer. I just want the audience to sort of join in a bit so you don't feel left out. And I'll tell you why I think the audience is so important after a horrible experience in a conference recently. So here we've got the electromagnetic spectrum, so we've got gamma rays and X-rays, which are useful, but mitochondria don't like them. Then we've got ultraviolet light, which is invisible. And then we've got visible light. Then we've got infrared light, which is also invisible. And then we've got microwaves, which are actually, the microwaves that we cook with are bad, but there are actually biological microwaves that we need to get into sort of certain meditative states. But on the whole, microwaving your food's a bad idea. So what we can see here is that the light that we need in our mitochondria and our biology needs is basically what comes out of the sun, because the sun makes UV light, which people for some reason think is very dangerous, a bit like red meat. And then there's also the infrared light that comes out of the sun, and lots of people just think, oh, I need to buy red light panels, whereas the sun makes lots of infrared. So we'll just go a little bit deeper now. So with these lights, the things at the gamma rays end, that's high energy, and then it goes lower energy at the radio wave section. So we've got different energy of light, but it also is going to have different information, and then it is going to do something different when it interacts with us. So just before we move on, just some little bit of sort of science call out for people. So Dr. Alexander Gurwitch, he was the first person that discovered that all living things make biophotons. So we make light. It's just we can't see it in general, but we can nowadays with special photomultipliers, and there are certain people who can see auras. And if you'd have told me that when I was a scientist, I would have rolled on the floor laughing and thought they were mad. But I think I think differently now. So Gurwitch was a very famous scientist, and the onion cell experiment is how people maybe know of him. And then after that, Dr. Fritz Popp, he was sort of the grandfather of the biophotonics era. So you can see all this started way back in the 30s. And Kirlian photography is something people might have heard of that can actually photograph and see biofields or auras. This is a Russian invention. And then at the moment, Dr. Rees Mould is somebody he's a young guy in the University of Westminster, and he works on mitochondrial biophotonics, so that's the mitochondria emitting light. So it's not just stuff that I've made up, that this is an actual science. So when it comes to light, how does it get to the mitochondria? Because obviously they're inside our cells, and the brain is sort of in a cave, and we're covered in skin and bone. So there must be a way that this light can get from our eyes, on our skin, all the way through the body. So inside our body, we've got something called non-visual photoreceptors, things like cholesterol, vitamin D, and these molecules can sort of pass light through the body because we've got vitamin D receptors in the mitochondria. So the information from the sun that the vitamin D collected, it can carry that light information all the way into the mitochondria. And then cholesterol is a really important non-visual photoreceptor. In fact, it's the main non-visual photoreceptor in the brain. And if you start depleting that, it's a very bad thing to do to brains in terms of how light and biology communicate. And then there are other molecules as well, which we'll talk about. So basically, a little bit of light goes on the eyes and the skin, and then the body's able to amplify it and propagate it. And this is just called non-linear optics. So you can propagate all this light so it can get deep down into things like the mitochondria. Then we'll go here. So we've got this idea that we need this light, and then it gets from our surfaces deep into the body, and there are molecules that are photoactive that can process light. So as I asked you at the beginning, do we have visible and invisible light? And people said, yes, we've got invisible light. And then if we look at how much light is UV in the sun, so it's about 5%, because remember UV is kind of high energy. And you're going to find out in a minute what UV A and B does in the body. We've got infrared, and that's about half of what sunlight is. So biology would be pretty stupid if it decided, oh no, we'll just use half the light that comes out of the sun. There's like 50% of all this infrared light, we'll just waste it and ignore it. So the infrared light's really important for the mitochondria, but also for brain development. And the body likes to gather in and concentrate this infrared light, and it puts it in the cerebral spinal fluid. People have measured huge concentrations of infrared light in the amniotic fluid, so it's obviously bathing a baby in infrared light and also bathing your brain in it. So it has to be something it wants to grab and pull in. When it comes to the information in blue light from the sun, that sets our circadian rhythm or our body clock, which is something sort of pretty important and very basic. And then I've got sort of another question for you in a moment. So I just want to say, in our bodies, we've got blue light and red light receptors, and then we've got ultraviolet light receptors in our bodies, in our eyes and in our mitochondria. Then we've got ultraviolet active molecules like cholesterol, that we've all heard of, melatonin, that's a UV active molecule, dopamine, thyroxine, serotonin, leptin and more. I said before that the infrared light gets concentrated in the CSF, but that's not the thing that people are afraid of. Knowing that you've got UV receptors inside you and you make UV, do you think that UV is as dangerous as people are trying to make out and the sun is really trying to kill us? No. Oh, okay. Good. So now we can move on. So why do we need a body clock? So we've learned just now that we have these trillions and trillions and trillions of reactions going on every second in the cell. So these all need to be on time. So it's a bit like an airport with trillions of aeroplanes going in and out, that we want our biochemical reactions to be on time. So we need some kind of clock to be able to control this. The other thing about biology is it's based on prediction, that biology always wants to know what's going to happen, and our biology is wired for predicting the future, and it doesn't like surprises. Like it doesn't want dusk to suddenly arrive and then for you to be trapped in the dark. And there's a whole load of other things we could go on for ages about biological surprises, that we've got machinery in place to sort of prevent it from happening. The other reason we need a body clock is, and to know what time of day it is biologies can be really slow, so it might take ages to make a particular hormone, and you might need the light signal at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the neurotransmitter or the pool of neurotransmitters is not going to be ready till 11. And there's loads of other things where it needs to spend ages getting ready, like digesting or detoxing. Then we have also daytime activities and nighttime activities, so particular biochemical processes that we do in the day, like eating, and then things like detoxing and autophagy and sleeping that we do when it's dark. And our biology is sort of geared to this light-dark cycle. A little bit more just detail, just in a different way to explain this with a picture. So we can imagine that the sun is the master clock, and then we've got our own personal master clock in the eye, which is the SCN, and then this oscillates the signal through the body into organ clocks, cell clocks, gene clocks. And then the more accurate our clocks are, the better our lifespan and our health span. But this does make sense, because if we've got very chaotic, out-of-timing cells, it just means we're more likely to have chaos, and then chaos is just a biophysical word for inflammation. And the kind of questions that your body needs a clock for, it says, should I get ready to digest food or poop? And it may sound a stupid thing, but like there's a special time of day when, if our circadian rhythm's working well, we should do a poo around about 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. once we've seen a particular aspect of the morning light. And if you regularly do your poo then, that shows a good clock. And also, I know it's kind of a random thing to say that when it's, with pooping, we definitely don't want to do that when we're sleeping. So that's why it's very important that we have, and also in terms of getting ready for food and sleeping. So the gut really needs to know what time it is, and there's clocks in that. Then the mitochondria want to know what time it is as well, because they want to know how much energy do you need, what shall I tell the nucleus. Because one thing you need to remember about the mitochondria is there's loads of them in your cells, like thousands, and they all have their own DNA, and there's only one nuclear DNA, so our DNA is outnumbered sometimes 1,000 to 1 to the mitochondrial DNA. So the mitochondria do a lot more than we think. So they don't just make ATP, they regulate gene expression, so we want to be nice to them and feed them what they like. And then back to this questions the body would ask, do we need to get ready for sleep or for work? I won't go into this in too much detail, but we have different sort of organ clocks as well. And you can imagine if things go out of time, if your heart clock's out of time, then you'd get the blood pressure rising and falling at the wrong times of the day. And someone might think, oh, I've got high blood pressure and take medication for no reason, just they had a bad heart clock. Then we've got kidney clocks that are out of line for lots of different reasons, but then people getting up to pee in the night is a big thing that people tell me all about. Then we've got pancreas clocks and muscle clocks and fat clocks and things like that, and skin clocks. because they're obviously, if people have got a messed up body clock, their skin doesn't know whether it's meant to be repairing or making oil or making melanin. So if you've got horrible clocks, it can affect how well your skin heals. So everything does have a clock, and sometimes a problem in a certain organ or tissue can all be fixed in one go with fixing a body clock. And again, it's not just me making things up. There's sort of like decades and decades of studies about circadian rhythms and metabolic health and pain or depression or diabetes, or all different things that all you can imagine. And then here's some more again, all different things, neurodegeneration, heart problems and things like that. So it's a genuine thing that it's important to have, respect your body clock. And then in terms of practicalities with people, the very basic thing, because some people might never have heard of this, or somebody might watch the recording, is we're designed to work on a light-dark cycle. So we want plenty of sunshine in the day, and then we want darkness after sunset and when we sleep. And we want to block artificial light at night. And lack of sunlight linked to disease, and too much artificial light at night in the bedroom, because there are still lots of adults that sleep with tellies on and lights on in their bedroom. There's like massive amount of research about that. So even if people don't remember anything about my talk and they happen to sleep with the telly on in their bedroom or the light on, just getting rid of that's a massive sort of movement in the right direction in terms of your body clock. And then, like I said, just getting more light in the daytime. Because like everything, you can take things to extremes and levels of perfection, like we can with everything. And this is Dr. Martin Moore-Reed here, so I'm not going to bother to play the video. It's only very, very short, because he has a book all about circadian rhythms, and he's been studying for 40 years, and he has a lot of research at his fingertips. But it's more to just say to you, it's sort of a valid area of research. That's been going on for a very long time, and it's something you can do things about easily. Oops. Okay, so back to energy and information from sunlight. So we just looked on the previous slide at very binary, light, dark. Make the bedroom and the house dark at night, get plenty of sunshine in the daytime. That's how far some people are going to go, and that's all they want to do. But do you think that throughout the day, that the sun's going to give out different information? Okay, so if we start with sunrise, so here we've got red and blue light are balanced and violet light, and this is basically an on switch for your body. So it's basically sets your body clocks for the day, because what happens with our body clocks is they drift throughout the day, and then they need the sunrise to be reset. And also, the sunrise has a very important effect on the mitochondria, because it basically gets it ready for fat burning, as in it's very important for making something called the TCA cycle, or the tricarboxylic acid cycle, turn. So that's like a wheel that feeds electrons and protons into the electron transport chain, which you'll see in a moment. The other important thing about seeing the sunrise is it's making a solar callus, getting you used to the sun, but it's also very, very healing, and everybody can go out at that time, people with burns, babies, all sorts of things. And also it's very, very important for leptin and thyroid signalling to get these body clocks and this sort of morning light. So the sunrise is important. There's a lot more I could say about it, but just in simple language we can think it sets the body clocks because they drift through the day. Then we've got the UVA rise. So this is ultraviolet A. So this does loads of things, and I think it's really interesting. So first of all, it makes serotonin out of tryptophan, and serotonin isn't a happy hormone, but it does lots of important things in the body. And what we need is, in the morning, a big pile of serotonin to get made, because then that'll make melatonin for sleeping later in the evening. And lots of people may have heard somewhere, maybe on Huberman or something, to get a good night's sleep, it all starts with morning light. So that's sort of the biochemistry behind it. Then also, other things like dopamine and thyroid, they're made out of an amino acid called tyrosine, which is also ultraviolet active. Because when I did protein folding, we used to shine light on tyrosines and tryptophans all the time. But I didn't know the biological importance of it. Then things like endocannabinoids and endorphins and enkephalins, where we can get high on our own supply, they're also ultraviolet sensitive or driven or switched on, however you want to call it. Then the other most important one, I think, is nitric oxide, because Ultraviolet A light makes nitric oxide, and this is really, really important for circulation, heart health, mood, body defences, and there are all sorts of weird supplements that people, or fruit-like plants that people tell me to eat, like, oh, you need to eat beetroot for making nitric oxide. It's like, no, you don't, you just need to go outside in the UVA. And if you can't go outside in the UVA, buy a little UVA light, because that's why I brought you some toys and things to play with. So there's a UVA light there and a red light. And then the other thing which UVA makes is it makes alpha MSH, which makes melanin. I'm not going to talk about melanin in this presentation because there's going to be too confusing, because there's lots of biochemistry already. But melanin is really important, not just for a suntan, but it does other things as well. And alpha MSH, the thing which tells the body to make melanin, is a big, massive appetite suppressant. So we can see that ultraviolet A light ticks lots of boxes for problems that people have. Then somebody asked me, because apparently there's a podcast or some video that says the best way to trash your nitric oxide is to do the carnivore diet. So now learning that ultraviolet A is one of the biggest stimulators of nitric oxide, do you agree with that statement? Because I need to find this video or this podcast because it's like the biggest pile of rubbish ever. Because basically staying inside all day is the best way to trash your nitric oxide. It's got nothing to do with carnivore diets. I don't even know why this video, what the context of this was. So no, it doesn't. So then if we move into the middle of the day, this is different now. So we've got ultraviolet B, so it's got more energy and it's got different information. And when the UVI index is over 5, so this is like a measurement of how much spectral irradiance, or basically how much light have we got coming through of a particular power. And we can't make vitamin D all throughout the day. It might be sunny, and I just know a lot about UV indexes, and I know it's about 3 now, even though if we went out, we'd think, oh, that's really sunny, I'm making loads of vitamin D. But you need the UVI to be over 5. So that means in the UK you can only really make vitamin D probably June to August between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And vitamin D is like, it's not a vitamin really, it's a hormone, and it does so many different things, from bone health, regulating appetite, talking to leptin, regulating inflammation, managing autoimmunity. And like I said before, there are vitamin D receptors in the mitochondria. And there are certain questions that people ask me all the time, and one of them is about vitamin D supplements. So I always say, if you can make it, don't take it. And another reason I stand very strongly about this is vitamin D is so complicated and does so many things. I don't trust the information in something made as a chemical. I don't think it's got the right information to give my body what it needs, whereas the sun and the way that powers up or makes vitamin D, I trust the sun will put the right information into the vitamin D that I make in my own body. And there are also about 20 different kinds of vitamin D anyway, and what people measure is the storage form, not the active form. So again, there's so much I could say about vitamin D, but just for the sake of this presentation, it's different to UVA. If you can make your own vitamin D, that's much better, or eat food that's got vitamin D in it that saw the sun. So there's lots of things like egg yolks, I think liver, salmon, or there's a whole list of foods, sardines, other meats and things. And then if you want to know about these different times of the day and what the sun's doing and how it can help you, there's an app called Circadian that my friend has just released. And there's a free trial. Okay, so for the sunset, it's not the same as sunrise, although it looks to the naked eye like it is, but according to the body, it knows, oh, the sun's setting, so now I need to get ready to go to bed. And like I've said lots of times, biology is really slow. And then, as we learned earlier, if we go out and in the UVA in the morning, make lots of serotonin, this is sitting there now ready to make melatonin. And if we don't go on our phones all night or go shopping in the supermarket at 10 o'clock when it's really bright, our body will turn that serotonin into melatonin. And then melatonin doesn't just help you sleep, it's actually a more powerful antioxidant than glutathione. And it's really important for autophagy, for detox, and it also regulates sex hormones as well. So if we have bright lights on and too much blue light after sunset, especially 2 hours before bed. It will ruin the pineal melatonin production. And then the other thing about, I said at the beginning, there's certain times to do things. We're not designed to eat after sunset for lots of reasons. It's one of these things that people will ask, well, when does sunset finish? Because you've sort of got there is a window. But the reason for it is, first of all, if you eat too late, eating is a signal to your body it's daytime, so you'll wake yourself back up. Then we're much more insulin resistant after sunset, and also if you eat too close to bed, you're going to stop leptin from communicating to your brain, and that's a very important hormone for appetite regulation. And leptin is very light driven, so if you've got a rubbish circadian rhythm, you'll have a leptin problem. But there are other reasons as well, biologically. But this is just biological reasons. I never tell people what to do. I give them information, and it's up to them what they want to do with that. So this is just an example of blue light. So you can imagine if you were a cell or something, or something in the body, you're used to receiving that signal where the sun is and that rainbow. So that's just showing a light pattern that comes out of the sun. When we look at the pattern that screens make, you can see it's wildly different. So there's loads and loads of blue, a big spike of it, and then hardly any red. So our biology is not geared for the information in artificial light. It's very confusing and alien to it. So that's a reason to block artificial light, especially at night, and why I go around sometimes wearing stupid glasses, because I just want to protect my eyes. Or with computers, I always turn the screen red, or take it outside. So the reason artificial blue light's really bad is it damages your eyes and your vitamin A, and I could do a whole talk about how important vitamin A is. Then it raises your blood sugar and cortisol, so this is a big problem because a lot of people come to keto and carnivore because of blood sugar issues, and sometimes they don't go down as much as people would like, and they obviously blame keto and carnivore, and I just say, oh, well, you're just sitting in blue light and you're on your phone all night, don't blame the food. Also, the blue light will destroy dopamine, and that's a big, massive problem for addictions, especially because, again, lots of people come to keto and carnivore because of food addiction, binge eating. So I always find ways to make the transition for people as easy as possible into keto and carnivore, and I think light, getting that right, can really help people. And it's also linked to cancer and obesity. So there's loads of studies about cancer and blue light and also obesity. Because like I said, it raises insulin and cortisol and blood sugar, things which people are always wanting to lower. And then the natural blue light that comes out of the sun is totally different to this artificial light. It helps your body activate its vitamin A, and it also shrinks fat cells. So it's kind of full spectrum blue light from the sun, has the right information for the body to do useful things, whereas the artificial light has information in it that's very confusing to the body, and it makes it do things that we don't want, like destroying its own melatonin, or raising cortisol and such like. So what I've done with this talk is I've kind of broken it up into bits in case I couldn't speak properly because I had a sore throat, and also to give people opportunities to ask questions before I slightly go into the mitochondria and a different topic. So does anyone have any questions about light? Yes?
What do you think about the fireworks light and candle light?
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yes, some people might say, oh, even our ancestors weren't used to like candles are too bright, but basically if you look at the trace of a candle, it's very, very red, same as a fire, there's no blue. And I think candles are fine in the evening, and salt lamps and incandescent bulbs and things like that. There's lots of soft, like circadian lighting people can use. And I think it's very sort of ancestral as well to have fire and sit round that and talk to people. Hello.
Can you explain why microwave oven is not electric?
That's because what it does is the way it heats up the water, it changes the bonds in water, and it completely distorts all the information in the food you're cooking. So you've basically made the food have information in it that your body wouldn't naturally expect. But it does, it's not just what it does to the food, it's the microwaves that it emits to the user. So yes, water does absorb in the microwave, but what it does to the water in the food makes it not how a steak or whatever should be. It makes the food have, it loses its structure, and the microwave itself just emits microwaves and EMFs. And I'm just also very much about, it's so alien to what our ancestors would have done that our biology doesn't have any idea what a microwaved piece of food is really, and the way it reacts to confusing things is inflammation, or because it's chaotic information.
You talked about vitamin D, and obviously in the UK between certain times and getting it out of food and not taking supplements. So do you think that through food and exposing our skin during the times that we can is enough?
No, because sometimes it's really cloudy in the UK, which is another topic I'm not going to go into why, because the clouds block UVB, and that's why I brought to show people, I've got a variety of different UVB lamps, because there are certain situations where people, if they'd have to go abroad, test their vitamin D, but there are also lamps when there are different generations now, and then some sunbeds could be safe if they had red light tubes in them, because when it comes to interacting with ultraviolet light, it's fine if it's with all the rest of the solar spectrum, the light. When you isolate UV on its own, it can be, it's very powerful. That's why there's fear of UV, because people have done studies with ultraviolet light just on its own, without the rest of the spectrum. So I think if we have a good summer in the UK and people know what kind of vitamin D foods to eat, you'd be okay. But then we had a bad summer this year with just clouds, so I'd think no, but someone might have gone away for 3 months. So that's where I'm at with it, because it's a very important question, which is better, like a light or supplements, because the lights are getting better. So people basically are trying to recreate sunlight. That's why I brought the Chroma D for people to play with, because it's got different colours. I mean, I have to play with it with you, because it's much more powerful than you would imagine. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I learned years back that eyes, as you mentioned in your slide, that it actually takes in UV as well.
Yes, it does. It's got neuropsin receptor, yes.
Yeah, but the visual cortex only allows us to see what we do see. Is there then the potential, or do some people see more of the visual spectrum than others? Do we actually take in a much broader spectrum through our eyes than we actually, through our brains, interpret?
Yeah, well, the thing is that the ultraviolet and the infrared will have an effect on us that's we're not consciously aware of. With Vincent van Gogh, he had his cataracts cut out, and he was able to see in UV. That's why his paintings are so, like there's so many different colours of like hay bales, because he could see in the UV as well. So it is possible, but we just have sort of structures in the way. So I think in terms of seeing in it, no, we can't. We don't have the kind of machinery that processes vision for us to see it as a camera, but we see it as in biochemically it has effects on us. But if you wanted to see in UV, you'd have to get some cataracts and have them cut out and not put lenses in.
So we're so far detached from that way of life of being outside and absorbing natural sunlight and watching the sunrise, and some days, whether you like it or not, we're inside all day and there's not much light outside anyway. How can we compensate for that?
Well, first of all, we can open windows, and secondly, regarding the sunrise, even if it's really cloudy, it's always, the light information is always going to be there. And it's like everything that you don't want trying to be perfect, just stopping you from doing something. Because that's the thing with the sunrise, okay, it's a bit antisocial in the UK in the summer, it gets up at 4:30, but other than that, you know, people can make an effort to see the sunrise, and then it'll be opening windows to let the light in, because glass blocks UV light and most of the red light, so you can bring the UV and the red light back into your room, even if the windows are shut. That's why I brought the little lights to show people. And I think sometimes it's just, once you're aware of something and getting more light, you can take steps in the day to go out when you think, oh, I could just drive to the shop, whereas you could walk instead, and things like that. And also obviously make the most of somewhere like this. So this is a very, as I would say, quantum environment, that everything's all open. And then a lot of people will just be saying how good they feel for lots of reasons, including getting the light. So I think it's just about looking at the times where you are stuck inside and thinking, could I go for a walk? Could I open a window? And just being aware of how much nature can help you if you let it.
Sorry, one more. In the wintertime, when the sun rises later, should we sleep in?
I don't think so, because no matter what, I just get up when the sun gets up. And I've just done that for that long because it's just something that's really important to me, that if I don't do it, it's like if I ate cake for 3 days, I'd feel awful. It's the same for me in the sunrise, that I just do it, and I've done it for that long, I just do. Whereas for somebody transitioning into that way of life, you'd have to just start doing it and see how you feel. Because it's like you don't know what you don't know when you haven't tried it. And also it's like, say if you did sleep in once, it's like, oh, big deal, you've slept in now, it doesn't matter. And then you just get used. And I just find it's easier to travel because I'll just lock into whatever the sun's doing in that place, and I don't get as much jet lag issues because of my whole timing. I'm relying on the sun to time with me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Our ancestors would have been exposed to moonlight
Oh, yes.
to different degrees throughout the monthly cycle. Do we know of how the information from moonlight affects humans? Because that's blue, obviously, as well.
Oh no, it's actually a reflection from the sun, but then there's just a massive amount of near infrared at night, and the moon's insignificant. So if you can get real moonlight, that's like really important. But nowadays, with all of the light pollution, even though the moon's up, if you slept outside, chances are you'd get a load of blue light as well because of people not turning lights off at night. But yeah, there's definite benefits to moonlight. And yes, it can be really bright, and there's lots of things the moon does. But getting real moonlight, you could probably get it here because it's just us and everybody turns the lights off at night. But in your own city, it might not be the moon.
If you live in one part of Norway, do you think you have enough availability on the salmon and egg? If you're not going to take a supplement?
The thing is, with that question, what I'd have to do is you'd have to measure your storage D and your active D, because a lot of people just panic and supplement and they didn't actually need it in the first place. Because that's the question. I wouldn't be able to say, oh yeah, it's fine, you can get plenty of sunlight in Norway or Sweden or Finland. I'd have to actually get somebody's data, because people from Norway, and especially Finland, they have much less melanin, so they can make more vitamin D than, say, somebody with darker skin. So I'd have to look at it on a person-per-person basis to see if somebody was getting enough vitamin D. I have on my YouTube channel a really good podcast with Jim Stevenson Jr., and he's got 20 years experience in vitamin D research, so it's worth listening to that, because I can't do his work justice here, and he's much better at explaining why supplements are a problem and not the solution. Yeah.
In Australia, I think just as meat's being demonised, sunshine is demonised also.
Oh yes.
Where people are very afraid to let their children go out and they're covering them up. I think we mentioned it to you, our grandson is half Kenyan, and so I'm just thinking we're so scared of this hole in the ozone and how dangerous the light is. I just wonder whether we could, whether he could take a note to school, because 2 weeks to take his hat off, no sunglasses because of the light coming in, and get him stripped off as much as possible. For him, because he's got such dark skin, that we would really need to do that. He's often sick. He's sick a lot.
Oh yeah, because
his immune system's crap.
yeah, exactly, and that's the same with other problems children have, like mood problems. That's why I said with the UV light controls so many neurotransmitters, and so many children have got ADHD and depression now and stuff. But yeah, with Australia, it is a problem, like the slip, slap, slop, and a lot of it is. I understand that yes, it can be, the UV can be something like 12 or 13 in Australia and New Zealand, and that is very high. So people could avoid direct sun at that time, but then to capitalise on the sun at like 10, 11 o'clock and then 2 o'clock when it's not so intense. And then what I found personally with making vitamin D and interacting with the sun is I'll go in it, but I'll come out before it's burned me or done anything, because I think with, as much as I think the sun's really important, I still think you can really hurt yourself in it as well. But I think blocking the sun and people wearing too many clothes and things like that and sunglasses it's when people discover nefarious behaviour, that's one of them, because the more you block the sun, the more customers you're going to make for the pharmaceutical companies, because there are so many diseases linked to lack of sunlight, ranging from cardiac to mental health to cancer and all sorts. So, like anything, I don't expect anyone to believe me. I just want to give you the information, and then you can go and look up for yourself, or just think logically based on what I've told you about you and people containing UV receptors and making UV. Right, I just need to move into the water section. Okay. So, what molecule makes up most of our bodies? Yes. Okay. How many phases of water are there? Yes. Okay, so very briefly, I was going to talk about the fourth phase of water, because everybody knows what steam is and everyone knows what ice is and liquid water in a glass. But with the fourth phase of water, the liquid crystalline water or the gel water, this is the biological water inside the body, the in our body water, not the in a glass structured water, which we can go into later. So basically this is liquid crystal, and that's sort of important because it's organised and structured. But the important thing about this inside the body water, the EZ water, which has got lots of different names, vortex water, living water, coherent water, gel water, is it can liberate an electron. So that means these electrons can move, so it means our water is a way in which we conduct electricity through our bodies. And anybody who's had an electric shock knows that, with water, if that's involved, it makes the problem worse. So on a positive side, this water in our body is really important for us to have a water battery and for electrons to flow. And the other important thing about water is that, first of all, with this gel water, if we cut ourselves, we don't sort of leak everything out. And when it comes to biology or biochemistry, everything in biology is coated in water, everything's wet, so nothing's dry. When people are talking about receptors and molecules and things interacting with each other, it's not dry things, they're all wet. And then, so this hydration shell around all of these molecules means that the way in which molecules interact with each other in the body has a massive dependence on the hydration and the water. And I won't go into this in massive detail now, but just to let you know that you can imagine if things weren't hydrated properly in the body, the molecules, the chemical reactions wouldn't work properly. And then now you know everything's hydrated in the body, all of the cells, all of your molecules, electrons can flow through this liquid crystalline water in our bodies. So it's just gently easing people into sort of this idea of bioelectronics. Then the other thing about charging our water battery, people might think, oh, that's completely nuts. Whereas now that we've learned that the sun makes UV light and infrared light, that this picture here just shows the absorption pattern of water. So we can see that water absorbs a lot in the UV and a lot in the infrared. So there's a physics reason for how the infrared that I told you before, the body will gather in and concentrate in different parts, how this now can sort of charge our water battery. And this is the work of someone called Dr. Gerald Pollack, so you can look it up, and he's been nominated for a Nobel Prize as well. So then the next question for you, are you a camel? As in, can humans make water? Yes. Okay. And then, what might this be? Let's go a quick video. And then what are we homing in on? It's just a drawing, but what might this thing here be? Yes. Okay, so we've got our mitochondria. So like I said at the beginning, when I was first learning about things in my 20s, I thought I knew everything and I didn't. So we've established light's much more important. I've touched over water, but now we'll go into mitochondria. So they basically transform energy and process information. So light comes in, they need light, that's really important. They need to know what time it is. As well. Electrons come in, water goes in as well. But what's important here now is that food also goes into mitochondria. So now we're getting to the food bit. So then all of these things go in, the light, the electrons, the water, the food, and food in terms gets broken down into electrons and protons. Inside the mitochondria there's also minerals and then hormones and things as well to help this process. And then what comes out of the mitochondria is metabolic water, so there's energy and information in that. ATP, which is energy, heat, that comes out as well. Mitochondria make light as well, like I told you about Dr. Rees-Mogg, that's what he studies. So they can communicate with other things with light. And also mitochondria make hormones as well, so they make pregnenolone, and that's like the master sex hormone. So that just can get turned into things like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, things that after a certain age we all want more of. And it can also make mitochondria make melatonin all day long for themselves, to mend themselves during the day. And they also can make dopamine as well. So they're much cleverer. They don't just make ATP, they do loads of things. So this is now back to the food thing. So I didn't give water enough of a justice, but we all agree we're made of water, so it must be important, and it covers all of our biology and it's involved in all our chemical reactions. So we obviously want lots of it to function well. So with food, if we eat fat, that makes what we'd say one equivalent of metabolic water. And then if we eat protein, that's about 0.65. And then if we eat carbs, it's like half an equivalent of water. So just in simple terms, even if somebody was all brand new to keto or carnivore, you can just see straight away that eating fat and protein is going to make a lot more water. And eating carbs all the time is going to make less water. And there's loads of things in the environment now that wants to steal our water, like blue light and non-native radiation. So water is very valuable. And the other good thing about this water is it's very low in deuterium, so it's about 5 to 10 parts per million. And like I said, I wanted to not put deuterium in the talk, but it's now in because somebody wanted it back. So with deuterium, I have done a talk on it before, that's why I won't go into it for ages. So it's basically, it's a kind of hydrogen, it's an isotope, but it's much bigger and it's got a different magnetic moment, different dielectric constant, so it's just different. And in simple terms, we don't want it in the mitochondria because it's going to get into a little molecular motor, which we're going to learn about in a minute, and break it basically. And also there's a lot more complexity about deuterium and heavy hydrogen, that we don't really want it in the body just because, well, in certain parts of the body, because it's not a hydrogen, it's too big, it's too different. But we do want it in certain places, like in collagen, for stability. So it's not evil, it's just there's too much of it in a lot of people now. And it's been known since the 1930s that drinking heavy water or deuterium water is harmful and lethal. So it's not a secret, it's not something that I've made up. And then if you want to learn more about deuterium, Dr. Laszlo Boros is a world expert and he's been on my podcast twice, and the first interview was absolutely brilliant, and he was allowed me to just ask him loads of questions about food and deuterium because I knew that's what people wanted to know, really. So just to take home from here that deuterium isn't radioactive, it's just a big hydrogen, and we don't want too much of it. And then Dr. Gabor Somely, he's a Hungarian, and he is a wonderful man, and he's worked on deuterium for 30 years, and deuterium-depleted water. And he did experiments on carbs and fat and foods to measure how much deuterium's in them. So with carbohydrates, it's about 150 parts per million. With fat, it's about 109 to about 120. So goose fat and lard are the lowest deuterium fats. But then we've got the seed oils, and they're something like 180 to 200 parts per million. And then collagen powder might make people sad, but that's got loads of deuterium in it as well, because like I said, the body concentrates deuterium into places where it needs stability, and it doesn't need stability in the mitochondria. So we can look at this and think, okay, if too much deuterium is a bad thing, maybe eating loads of carbohydrates isn't a very good idea, and maybe eating fat and preferentially would be a good idea if we want to look at health through a deuterium lens. Because with too much deuterium, there are papers and studies on it. It can lead to diabetes, obesity, autoimmunity, and other health issues. So it's not a good thing. Yeah, so before we go into the mitochondria, like a healthy level of deuterium is between about 125 parts per million to 135, but the number keeps slightly changing. But we can see straight away that 150 parts per million from carbs, that's not, we don't want to be that level, and we definitely don't want to be 200 like the seed oils. So we're just going to go for a little journey inside the mitochondria, so we can look into a bit more about energy and information. So what happens is the electrons go in and they go down the electron transport chain, and the first base or complex one is a UV light receiver as well as an electron receiver, and then the other complexes are red light receivers. So now we know what we've learnt already about red light and UV light. And then complex 4 is the one that makes the deuterium depleted water. So water comes out of complex 4. And then the ATPase, the little motor that spins that doesn't like deuterium, that's what we'd call complex 5. So like I was saying before, that the ATPase spins, and it has, at the moment, our current belief in science has a hole in it, and hydrogen or protons can go down, proticity, so that's a proton current. That's supposed to go down the ATPase, but if we put deuterium down, it's too big. Like an adult going down a kid's slide, it's going to break it, basically, in sort of simple terms. Then, as I said before, if we've got electrons going down the electron transport chain, we've basically got an electric current going on in the mitochondria, and without going too complicated into biochemistry, fat has got more electrons than carbs. So what do you think will happen if we eat fat instead of carbs? So we know already about the water, but now if we have more electrons from fat, what do you think happens just in terms of power from the mitochondria? Will it be better or worse? Better. Yes, yes, you're right, but there's an even more interesting thing to me about fat and glucose here. Yes, so you're correct. So if we put more electrons in, we're going to have more flow, but also we're going to make more water, because that's just a mixture of electrons, oxygen, and hydrogen stuck together. So if more electrons go down, we have decent oxygen levels in the body, then we can make more water. Okay, so now we come back to this idea that the complex 1 is an ultraviolet light receiver. So this is to do on a sort of quantum level. So in terms of glucose, where did it come from originally? So if we think about all sources of carbs on the planet, where do they actually come from originally? Plants. Did someone say plants?
I said plants.
Yes.
Before there'd be light.
Yes, photosynthesis, yes, correct. So exactly that. So we have light, and we already know the sun makes UV light. We can't make or grow carbs without UV light. So what happens is the carbs have been tagged, or there's a quantum information or quantum spin. So the electrons from glucose, when they go into the mitochondria, down the electron transport chain, they go through complex 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there's a bit of a problem with complex 1. It leaks. It leaks electrons, so they escape. And in terms of like free radicals and stuff, an unpaired electron that's escaped, that would be a free radical. So when it comes to people, you might have heard, oh, burning fat's much cleaner than burning sugar, and here's the reason why. It's because the electrons, the information in the electrons from glucose, your mitochondria can tell the difference. Did that electron come from fat, or did it come from sugar? And I think that's like to me, I think is so amazing and clever. So just to look at the fat side of it, what happens with the fat is the electrons go in at complex 2, so they don't bother to try and get into complex 1, the one they can escape out of. They go straight into complex 2. There's less distance for them to travel, so they're less likely to get lost on the way. So that means this is why fat is a less inflammatory fuel than glucose. And this is not me making stuff up. You can go and look at papers about electrons going down electron transport chains depending on where they came from. So I just think it's fascinating. The mitochondria can tell the difference between an electron from fat versus glucose. Maybe it's just me that thinks this is the most amazing thing ever, but and it's very good for me when I have to have a debate with somebody about carbs. And nobody can argue now with this sort of thing. Like when I start to get this, they just like leave. They think, okay, right, maybe I'll reconsider. I'll come back and argue with her later. And also, just to finish off with the mitochondria, they don't just make ATP, they're actually now antennae as well. So that they make their own electromagnetic fields too. So when it comes to getting into sort of energy stuff, people will say that mitochondria are sort of like their sixth sense, and I believe them. Right. So now we're going to go to the bit which I've been wanting to get to for ages of why eating out of season fruit and vegetables is this big bugbear of mine, and people think I'm stupid and mad and whatever. So now we know that light has got energy and information, and also I didn't really talk very much about the magnetic part of light. So I said right at the beginning we've got the electric part, and then we've got the magnetic part. So this is just another picture so that we can see the information coming in. So we also know that the plants do photosynthesis, and they make glucose and fruit and stuff like this. So basically this magnetic information coming out of the sun is going to get programmed into the plant or the vegetable or the fruit, sort of like a stamp or a barcode. So the information of where something grew on the planet and at what time of the year it grew is stored in a quantum way in the water and in the electrons. Well, obviously water's got electrons in it, in the fruit or the vegetable. So it's been stamped, it's got a barcode or a zip code or a time stamp. And with our microbiome and our mitochondria, they, like I said before, biology hates surprises, and it likes everything to be predictable. So my mitochondria at the moment, if I was going to eat any fruit or vegetables, it would want something that is growing seasonally and locally. It's expecting that I might eat one of those oranges off the tree or something like that. And if I did, it would be, okay, well that matches. Whereas what happens when we start eating fruit and vegetables that have been grown miles away from where we live? So we can think about the pineapple, for example, here. So pineapples don't grow in the UK, and nothing grows in the winter really, especially fruit. So basically this pineapple grew up in the tropics, and it was programmed by light from the tropics, the magnetic information, the stuff, the electrons and everything that the mitochondria are going to end up reading. And my gut and my gut microbiome are not expecting a pineapple if I was in the UK. It's because it's impossible. They are primitive sort of thinking in some ways. They think, how on earth is you possibly eaten this? And because it's providing confusing information, also there's lots of deuterium in tropical fruit as well, and we already know that's not a good idea either. So all this deuterium and all this confusing information is going to cause confusion, noise and inflammation. Whereas if I was, say, in the UK again, apples grow in the UK from July to late October, and this is the one time I do eat things because I can actually pick them myself in my own garden, and my gut microbiome and my mitochondria are expecting, if I was to eat any kind of produce, the information in that is going to match Leeds in the UK. And that's the one time which I will eat fruit, because they're my own apples. So I'm not saying other people should, but my point of this business about the fruit and the vegetables is I think it's really difficult to find seasonal local produce, and I think this is a lot of a quantum reason of why carnivore diet works. Because people get massively confused at me about when I'm trying to explain to them, can I have avocados? No, there isn't an avocado tree in Yorkshire. Can I have olives? No, they don't grow in the UK. And I sometimes think, do you know what, just don't eat any plants at all, and then you can't eat something that's not seasonal or local. And I think this is one of the other reasons of why, when I've had clients that nothing's working, and then they're saying, oh, keto's shit, I'll say, okay, just don't eat any plants at all then, and the problems go away. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just, and then there are obviously people who will swear blind that eating things from their allotment is really healthy, and I believe them as well. We can all see how something like this kind of food, the processed food, might look lovely, but then I just don't even want to begin at the horrible quantum information that's in sort of processed food, and how confusing it would be to the gut microbiome and the mitochondria, and they'd go crazy. And we all know how inflammatory this kind of food is, but I think a lot of people don't really understand how inflammatory non-seasonal and local vegetables can be, and why people always ask me, why aren't you completely carnivore? And it's just that reason. It's just, I think, if it's my apples from my garden at that particular time, it doesn't affect me personally. Maybe somebody who had autoimmunity, it might. I don't know, I'd like to test. So I'm conscious of time, and there is a little bit more I have to say, but it doesn't matter if I don't. And if people want to ask any questions now about what I've just said about the mitochondria and the... Okay, Ben.
Most of the lamb that we produce in the UK is actually sold to the French. Most of the lamb that we eat in the UK comes from New Zealand. Is that a problem?
Yes, but not as much as the plants, because with the way that the fat is made, it's done in a totally different way that doesn't involve light information, and also you don't have the deuterium problem. But I haven't looked in, I'd have to sit down and think about it really, really hard, because I think if you can eat meat that's as close to you as possible, it's best, but I can't formulate an argument at the moment yet. And also I think for some people transitioning to keto and carnivore, that it was just too confusing for them to try and source something local. But I just think it's ridiculous about the thing is, I don't entertain vegans or arguments, but one thing I always stand by has how bad for the environment flying food around the world is. And I really don't know. I mean, what I have to do is get some people and ask them to, on purpose, eat lamb or meat from far away, and then switch back to local and see if they felt any better. Because I only got obsessed with these fruit and vegetable arguments over many, many years of not being able to understand why some people were fine with plants and others weren't. But I think with that question, and it's the same with seafood, because some people don't live on a coast. So I don't know, but I know it's not as bad as the fruit. But I'll find out. Yes.
I always thought BSE was a scam, and I carried on eating beef. Can you say something about that and Lyme disease?
Yeah, I think basically it's a bit like COVID, that there's another factor involved which made something that's not meant to be pathogenic. And then there was a big flurry to research it, and then they realised it wasn't the beef, and it wasn't something that you could take in by mouth. And then the whole research went quiet, and I don't know anymore because I left the lab. But I think it was, there's certain topics I don't really want to bring up, but I agree that it was made up. Because also, when we go around looking for people, I know one person that had CJD, but then they said it didn't come from beef. So it's just one of these topics. There's too many times when weird viruses have appeared at given times in history in conjunction with other things appearing. So I think it's just whoever is trying to cover up the introduction of new technology, and then there'll be some virus, and they'll blame that, whereas it's actually it's other factors. But I agree, I don't believe in it now, but at the time I did, because I was just a teenager. Yeah.
I was just going to say real quick, fun fact, in that county, I actually spoke to a rancher in Canada who worked with a researcher from England who was working on mad cow disease.
Yes.
And he didn't think it was a problem either.
No.
Around the same time, they rolled out some sort of medication on some sort of weevil thing, like bore into the hides of cows, and it ruined the leather. This big horrible story.
Yeah.
So the British government required that they basically give them this medication with a much, much higher dose than kill this thing, and that's when mad cow started coming out right after that. And they said, okay, it's this prion issue. So this guy was saying he didn't think that that was the case, and so he had special dispensation. Like in Canada, it was required that all the cows had to be given this, and they found that, well, he had special dispensation to not have to do that, not have to give the cows that, and he could not get them to track mad cow. He was feeding them the brains and nervous tissue of these confirmed mad cow cases. They could not get into them, and he had all this documentation up and ready to go. He did this for years, and he was working with an MP and a vet in the UK, and getting all this information together. Unfortunately, the vet at one point lost control of his car and drove into a building and died. And so then he was working with the MP to try to get it out, and then unfortunately he lost control and drove over the bridge and he died. And then this guy who had 6 children said, okay, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore, and he just dropped the research and he went back home. And several months later, the wife of this guy called the rancher I was speaking to and said, they got him, he's dead. And so they got rid of all of them.
That's awful.
But they actually still have the information. They took that information to like a legal team that goes after governments and these sorts of things. And they looked at it and said, this is massive, this is absolutely huge, and we can't touch this. We actually feel for our lives if we touch this. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. That's a different. What I found was in the lab nobody could make prions, but we're just a lab. Whereas that's a really serious. Like, let's do the whole thing. Let's feed a bread. That's like that's like for anybody who didn't think it was a scam. Now that's nailed it.
Yeah. So the difference being you didn't give these cows that would have helped.
And nothing. You can't do it. No.
They couldn't get
No.
it.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it's very reminiscent of other things, of unusual viruses and prions and things. Yeah, thanks for that.
I've heard that there's a thing around easy water and supplementing with it. Can you say something about that?
Oh yes.
Whether it's crazy or not?
Oh no, it's fine because I have I'll just show you something. Before, we're nearly at the end because I've got the woo. Well, I don't think it's woo, but other people do. So it's fine. Yes, I'll have like a... Yes, that's it, my top FAQs. I know people always ask me this. What do I think about vitamin D in the sun? What's your favourite way to structure water? What do I think about red light devices? And I don't understand meditation. How do I do it? So I always get these questions. So that's why I brought things for people to play with. Well, let me just see where we... Right, okay, so you can ask more questions as well. I just wanted to break this up into sections because even though everything's related, it sort of might be all brand new to people. So now we're just going to go into... this was something I did a talk on for Phil. Now, I also need to make this into a YouTube video. This is like me squishing a whole talk into one slide. So about the heart not being a pump, this is very important in the keto and carnivore world, I think, because heart disease and cholesterol is something that people just wave all over the place, and they don't even understand what a heart is to start with. And there's doctors I've had doctors stopping my patients doing keto, saying, "Oh, you're going to give them a heart attack," and they don't even know what a heart is. So anyway, first of all, the heart's too small to pump the blood around the body because we've got sort of 50,000 miles of blood vessels, and I just don't see how a thing in the middle of the body can do that. And even I don't know very much about fluid dynamics, but you'd need to put the pump in my feet to pump it round. Also, when the heart beats, the aortic arch goes, it kind of curves inwards like that. So if it was pushing blood out, it would do that. Like if you push water through a hose, it straightens. And you can, there's loads of videos of hearts beating. When I used to work in a cardiology lab, we used to do things with heart. So I know full well that when it beats, the aorta goes in, not out. So it's obviously sucking. And also there are, like the red blood cells, some of them are bigger than the capillaries, so you can't just have a heart powerful enough to squeeze a red blood vessel, so it's got to squash itself and go through a capillary. It's impossible. And then also the blood actually moves itself by electrostatic repulsion. which I'm not going to go into because that's a little bit much for the moment, because I didn't explain exclusion zone water in depth, and people will be like, what does that mean? If somebody is a sort of more electrically minded, they would be able to work it out, or if they've seen my talk before. So the point of this is, just in simple terms, if I showed my mother this slide, she wouldn't think the heart, what she might do, she'd probably think, oh, maybe it isn't a pump, because it's just really obvious. It's just nobody questions doctors or anything, or textbooks. So then people have been talking about this for ages, that and just been told they're insane. Whereas if you look at sort of the structure of the ventricles and the hearts, it's actually a chestahedron, which is sort of a, people would sort of almost say it's like a platonic solid. And when you have a chestahedron and you spin it in water, it'll make a vortex. And when people have got hearts and opened them up and unravelled them and then studied them in more detail, they've found that when the heart muscle contracts, it creates a spiral, so it creates a vortex. And this vortexing is something that is way bigger than you can possibly imagine. Like, so many things are a vortex. And it's also, when you make vortexes, you can also make energy and electricity and energy as well. So there's a lot more to the heart than just sort of pushing blood out. It squeezes it and makes this vortex. So this was something I didn't go into in massive detail when I first talked about the heart not being a pump. It was more, well, okay, what is it? And what's a vortex? But like I say, I'm always learning new things. And so I got very interested in the vortices. And what I found out was that actually our blood vessels, when we make vortexes as the blood goes down the vessels, and if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have feeling in all of our fingers. When we pee, that's a vortex. So we pee out of whatever, and that's a vortex as well. The plasma or the ether, or whatever you want to call it, the fourth phase of matter that we exist in, that we just don't realise we do, that's just spinning charge, and that's a vortex. And then hydrogen, which is something very important, hydrogen water in the gut microbiome making hydrogen, that's also a vortex. And then in terms of sort of actual hardcore physics, centripetal implosion or charge collapse, which causes gravity, also causes consciousness. So that would be like a charge implosion to a sort of 0 point, and physics agrees. So I'm not going to explain any of this, because with this stuff here, it's more, I'm just throwing out ideas and tidbits for people, because some people will be, this is stupid, and other people will be like, oh yeah, a chakra's a vortex, and consciousness and a caduceus, and it'll be meaningful for them. But also the more I study the heart and stuff, like I say, I always go back to stuff, the more I learned, the more I know how wrong what I was taught at university is. And then Victor Schauberger, he's a very famous scientist from Austria who studied lots of sacred geometry and the golden ratio and Fibonacci's, and these all relate into sort of natural vortices that get made in nature. So this is what living water is. Water isn't meant to be just put in a bottle and stored in a fridge. It's meant to be moving about. It's meant to see the sunlight. It's meant to go around corners. It's meant to vortex. And Victor Schauberger was also quite a famous inventor, and his most famous invention is something called a trout turbine, so that uses natural vortex to generate power. So obviously British Gas and Northern Electric really hate things like a trout turbine, because it might sort of interfere with their ideas. So there's plenty of other ways to make energy, not just relying on, that's a whole other topic. And then also Victor Schauberger also made something which uses air and water to spin a turbine. So there's a lot more to these vortexes than people think, and I'm going to show you a vortex now, and then you can taste the vortex water, because someone was asking about water structuring. So, a little, and sorry. Right, I'll yes, so it takes about 3 minutes to make, and this is all specially designed on sort of physics. And again, with Victor Schauberger, you have to look it up, and you have to look at vortices and sacred geometry. So this is now making a vortex, so it's basically imploding down to a sort of center point, and then this particular bit, because you can come and look at it here. There's a special part of this plate where it's meant to line up with. So in terms of making energy water or living water, this at the moment is my favourite method. And you can get really expensive versions of this, but you can just put water in a glass with some minerals and put it outside in the sun, and that'll structure it. And you can taste this as well, because the more I get into the water, the more I think having tasty drinking water is really important. Tasty drinking water is really, really important for children, because when I was a child we weren't allowed anything other than water to drink, and it was disgusting, the tap water, but we still just drank it. And I think I've also found with sort of food or clients that if people can feel satisfied with water, then they're not so much craving food. So that'll just make its vortex, and by the time I've finished, which will be soon, it'll be ready for you to taste, and you can see what you think. So back to that question, no, I don't think it is. There's way, even me that loves water has totally underestimated the power of it, but I think again it's just a big massive journey, and water, like light, can be really quite difficult to understand, and you have to just give it a chance. So then the next thing, the last thing that's esoteric, that to link back to hypnosis and water and crystals and things, are Vogel crystals. So with Marcel Vogel, he was one of IBM's top scientists, and he's got 100 patents to his name, and he's an expert in crystals, magnetism and luminescence. So obviously I'm interested in him already. So he sold his technology company, and he had a dream, and then he worked out how to cut a Vogel crystal in a specific way. And then he did lots of experiments with a Vogel crystal in terms of plants being able to sense his intention. And he's got all kinds of different devices, and you have to look into him, because if someone had just told me the second part of his story, not the fact he was a top scientist at IBM with 100 patents, I wouldn't be so interested. But he's obviously a very clever man. So basically, what these Vogel crystals what he also did, Marcel Vogel, was he studied action to distance and the effectiveness of remote healing, and it didn't obey the sort of inverse square rule. So Einstein didn't actually understand action at a distance either. That's why he called it spooky action at a distance. And then something called coherent scalar longitudinal waves, resulting from non-destructive charge collapse, which is a vortex is that. I'm not going to go into it, is actually the physics of entanglement. So physicists, hardcore physicists, actually agree that quantum entanglement action at a distance is a genuine physics phenomena. So it's not as wooish as people might think. And you can again look into it. Dr. Dan Winter's quite good. Well, he's not very easy to understand, but he's got lots of information. So basically, these Vogel cut crystals, in simple terms, for to sort of tie this up with this talk, is it's basically something that can cohere or create coherence and amplify a thought signal into anything that contains water. So it could be water, or it could be a plant, or it could be a person, or it could be an animal. And then, as we know, the water in our bodies, the inside water is liquid crystalline. These Vogel crystals and humans and crystals do have a certain sort of resonance or relationship to each other, because quartz is made of silicon dioxide, and we have that in our body. So this is just, again, stuff that when I was much younger, I was always interested in stuff like this, but there definitely wasn't any science, and I didn't know about Vogel crystals and things. So I've brought you a Vogel crystal that you can use if you, or I can show you what to do with it for people who are interested, because you just clear it in a different way to another crystal. And for other people will be what the F have I just listened to, which is fine. We've got the last slide now. So I just wanted to end with like the Vogel crystals, and like I said, Alexander Gurwitch, who's a very big studier of biophotonics, he was the one that actually thought of this morphic field, which Rupert Sheldrake, if many of you may have heard of, has taken it forward, of this idea that the mind isn't inside the skull, it actually exists out of it. And these Vogel crystals and Marcel Vogel's experiments, which he did for years and years, is another sort of evidence to this. So, just to finish up, I just want to thank Ben and and Phil and everybody, and Lydia and everybody who's helped organise this. Then Dr. Gerald Pollock for sort of information on water, Dr. Laszlo Boros for deuterium, Dr. Dan Winter for the physics, and then all of you for attending. And then I always mention my goddaughter at the end, Alexis Kleiner, because she got vaccine injured at 3 and she's a non-verbal autistic, so we spend lots of time finding new things for her. So half the time my water vortex or a crystal or a hydrogen water or something else is for her, not just for me. And then interestingly, when I went to the water conference, I met somebody called Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who's a very highly regarded Russian quantum physicist that's also a biologist, and he has 300 publications on different things from light, water, consciousness, and he's got 12 books. And he said he'd come on my podcast, and then he said a very interesting thing to me. He said, "Oh, I don't always use my phone. I just do telepathy to certain people." And I was like, "What?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, really?" And I said, "Oh, great." And he said, "I'll talk about it on the podcast if you want." So again, the other reason people think, why are you so obsessed with telepathy? It's because Alexis can't talk, and she sort of can do the letterboard, but then she had a really bad fall, and now she can't. So I always say to her mum and Alexis, I'm getting one step closer to the telepathy, maybe not in this lifetime, and if I ever do, I probably wouldn't tell anybody. And my closing comments after the water conference, when I went, there were scientists sort of 110 times more intelligent than me, mind-blowing science, but what I could say to myself was, at least I can feed myself proper food. Because the stuff that they ate, I was just thinking, how can you not know? How? And that's what I want to say to people who sort of come here and think, everybody knows everything and I don't, but at least you know how to feed yourself proper food.
If they're,
I've turned it off.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Sarah. Amazing. Loved it. If there are any questions, great. But I just wanted to say quickly, what I really love, and a couple of people have asked, is to get a proper group photo, and we can, while everybody's here, before they scatter like poultry. It would be great to get that outside, and so if I could go out and grab a couple of the stragglers, and if you guys could stay here, we could get a really nice group shot, and then I can send it out to everybody. And I'm also going to, everybody who's come here, we're going to set up a doc, as Steve is, and then give everybody access to the talks anyway, so you'll have them, and possibly the slides if the speakers are willing to share. The ones I've asked are fine, but you'll probably see them anyway. But and also, if anybody's interested, I just was speaking to Emily, who works here. I've known since 2019 when we last did it, and we booked it again. So if anybody's up for it next year, we're doing it next year. And I was thinking, and it's going to be a bit later, it's going to be in November, from around the 23rd onwards. But as she said, yeah, the weather's great. It's probably just about the same, just gets dark a bit quicker. But I was thinking we could do even more days if anyone's interested, and that will give maybe some time. Some people wanted to do day trips and things like that. Maybe you even might get a whole day off if you're lucky. But anyway, I'll be messaging, emailing all about that when we get it sorted out. But just to let you know that if anyone wants to jump in again, we've had so many people. Everybody's been sharing it beautifully, on their social media, on their Instagram and whatever. So many people are going, God, let me know about next year, and I can't believe I missed it, and all of that sort of thing. So you guys get first refusal anyway. Anyone got any questions for Sarah while I run off and get stragglers?
Are we doing the Q&A at 7:30 as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yes. Yes, we're going to do a Q&A at 7:30, but I'm going to let Sarah off because her voice is gone. She's, and...
Oh no, and also, yes, because also I think it's easier just ask me, grab me, because I've brought things down for you to look at, and sometimes it's to do with, there's a context now of what you could ask me about, and I'm happy to answer, and if I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll send you to somebody who I think could give you a better one. So Phil, are we just going outside now to have the photo?
So he's going to grab some people. And
All right, if people wanted to ask questions just while they're waiting, that's fine.
Can you actually measure deuterium in the body then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do blood, breath, saliva. Normally the tests from light water or osmolar water, I'm pretty sure both breath and saliva. So yes, you can measure.
Would you be able to do that at your local doctors?
No, you have to basically buy the thing, it comes posted to you and you breathe into it or spit into it and send it back. So it's a bit like quite a lot of other tests, it's a bit too specialist.
Right.
What's your thoughts on drinking naturally carbonated water?
Oh, I think bubbles are great, and I think CO2 gas is amazing. It's like hydrogen and oxygen and other things which get dissolved in water. There's sort of places like Lourdes where the gas is dissolved in the water and why they're so healthy. So I think carbonated waters. People think oxygen's the be all and end all. Carbon dioxide is really important as well. So I'm a big fan of nanobubbles and gases in water.
Versus water that's like artificially carbonated, is there a difference between natural and like?
The natural would be better because it's going to there'll be all sorts of movement that's happened that energizes, you know, like those vortexes, whereas just an ordinary carbonator, all it does is you connect it to a gas cylinder, it just goes and sprays carbon dioxide in, so it's actually quite sort of harmless. Most of the carbonators don't even plug in the wall. The natural would be better, but it's quite hard to find, and just a gas cylinder is okay.
Sorry, for the machine over there, is it better to tap water or is it filtered?
Oh, distilled. With water, I always distilled. 3 times distilled would be counted as medical, or 5 times for biochemistry grade. So I've got 2 distillers, and I do one and then move it and put it into another one. And I just use a COZ distiller that they are sort of about £100 on Amazon. They're really expensive distillers, but because I have worked in labs, I sort of understand certain processes, and I know distilling's very simple. You don't need to pay $1,000 for something. It's like, so I just use 2 distillers back to back, whereas just for beginners, some people are really, my mum and dad just love distilling once, and then I remineralise. And that's not very complicated either, just use good quality sea salt. I just add magnesium and potassium as well. But definitely distilling to like wipe it clean, because there's obviously pharmaceuticals and fluoride and all sorts in water that you need to get out. Yes.
Sam, you spoke a bit about collagen powders and
Yes.
deuterium. What about bone broth?
Oh, that's okay. Because with collagen powders, it's all like dry and really condensed, whereas oxtail soup and bone broth and everything, that's like all natural, it's not very concentrated. So there might be slightly higher deuterium, but it's not super concentrated like the dried, collagen powder. So yes, and I think marine collagen's a bit lower because fish are not very heavy, and the heavier the animal, the more deuterium is going to concentrate in its collagen because of its weight. So lamb collagen powder technically would be better than beef, just because the lamb's light. I've just never seen lamb collagen powder. No.
Sorry, is there somewhere then in like a list of different foods?
Yes.
Deuterium is contained?
Yes, there's some in the back of Gabor Chomely's book on deuterium depletion. Then I've collected numbers over the years, and it's in in one of my courses, or sometimes I give it away as a free PDF. I've got this book, Sourcing Low Deuterium and Nutritious Food, and I've got a list of it. But in general, it's all quite easy, that anything fatty is low deuterium, and anything like high sugar is going to be high deuterium, and then protein can be in between. And then there's a few sort of wild cards, like seed oils being really high, and collagen powder. Then beans are a deuterium bomb. That's one of the reasons I gave up dark chocolate, was the deuterium. And then I started again and then gave up for a different reason. But yeah, I'm trying to think of, in general, if it's like a cucumber grown in Britain, it's not going to have very much deuterium because it's not very sweet and there's not much light, whereas a banana is going to have loads of deuterium because it's an equatorial fruit. And then anything processed food can be like seed oils in the 200s. So for most people, they think it's really complicated, whereas actually it's really simple. But if in doubt, if you just do carnivore, it'll be low deuterium. And Dr. Laszlo Boros is carnivore as well, and he very strict about it. But he's given me sort of different levels of food. But sometimes it gets to the point where rather than getting a big table of food, just eat fat and protein and it'll be low deuterium. Yeah.
Water is very sweet, like coconut water.
Oh yes, it doesn't. There's no sugar in it, you know.
But it's thick as well.
Oh yes, it is. It's special. Oh, that's not. That's just my portable magnesium. If you want, I use Dr. Carolyn Dean's magnesium. But when it comes to remineralizing it, people get really stressed out and think it's really complicated. But I can make the water over and over and over again. I didn't put any of that in the water. That there's like underneath the vortex, you can put. This is getting very wooish now. You can put different things in different boxes. If you open that, there's a Vogel crystal I've taken. Yeah, there's the Vogel crystals in there. So,
I'm interested in these and how...
oh yes, that's it. I have to do that with you because the chroma D is very powerful and I burnt myself with it. If you want to hear my brilliant sales pitch of UV lights, I've been burnt by all of them now. So, yeah.
Yes, really interesting what you would use these for.
Oh yes, because with this it's got red light, UVB narrow band, so it can make it quickly. It's got violet light for oxygen, so it's kind of a multi-light. So it's not just UV light on its own, it's got a mixture of other things.